When human beings lose their mental well-being and their clarity of thought, they often lose their inner conscience and their humanity. This is when society breaks down. We are at war with others, but we always first at war with ourselves. No person who has inner peace wants to lash out or hurt another. I know this from my own experience. For many years, I lost my capacity to be rational and to consider my families and those I loved. I struggled with depression, with chronic anxiety and eating disorders. I was able to hang in there, often appearing highly functional to the outside world. But inside, I was working so hard to stay afloat of my own anxiety and negative thoughts that kept surfacing in the dark corners of my mind. Mental suffering shuts down the rational mind. Being in that kind of suffering is not a rational place with sound judgment. I was caught up in so much unrelenting inner pain that all I could focus on was how to get relief from that pain. I made poor decisions, but it was a game of survival. Normal day-to-day living was like an ultra-marathon. The difference was that the pain was in my mind and heart. Mental pain is invisible. 10 years ago, I came across the 3 principles of innate health, and I stumbled onto a simple but profound explanation of how human beings operate. These principles explain how all people function psychologically, and the implications radically and completely changed the way I related to myself and the world around me. Up until that point, my mental life seemed to kind of ebb and flow between feeling resilient, confident, hopeful, productive, and relatively at ease, to feeling depressed, chronically anxious, insecure, despairing, and even suicidal. I thought the unpredictable nature of my ups and downs was down to my life circumstances, my genetic makeup, my personality, a chemical imbalance, and so on. None of these are particularly crazy theories, right? And most, if not all of them, were backed up by the stream of experts I visited over 3 decades of searching for answers. At one of the lowest points of my depression, I began reading voraciously. I read every book I could lay my hands on that described stories of suffering or adversity. These ultimately resulted in profound personal transformation. I became more and more curious as to how does such transformation occur in people with obviously very different genetic makeups and backgrounds. There seemed to be something more fundamental which was catalyzing change in all of them. Something they all had in common, but I couldn't quite put my finger on what it was. It felt so elusive. When I stumbled across the 3 principles paradigm, I realized that this was the missing piece. The principles describe how all people, at all times, from the moment of birth to the moment of death, are experiencing their lives via the mechanism of thought. Thought is the creative agent or power from which we create our moment-to-moment lives, our attitudes, our feelings, our opinions, our perceptions. These include the darkest moments of despair and hopelessness to the best moments of clarity and love, and everything in between. Thought is the pure potential of the mind that takes form every millisecond through our thinking. This allows us to know and relate to the world around us. The principle of consciousness is the force that brings thought to life. It makes our thoughts compelling and appear real. The principle of mind is the constant intelligence source that generates and powers our thinking and awareness. Mind is the intelligence beyond our own intelligence. It's not the brain. The brain's biological. The mind is spiritual. The mind is what allows us to have insight and learn anew. It allows us to heal and to forgive, to get over things, and to constantly recreate and see afresh. The trick is to realize that it is these invisible forces or facts that are creating our feelings via thought in the moment, and to see that our feelings can never come from other people or circumstances. Seeing where our feelings come from 100% of the time, from the inside rather than from the outside, is not only hopeful and empowering, it's also true. It keeps us focused on the constant flow of new thought rather than overthinking and overanalyzing in a futile attempt to fix the problem and change our feeling. It was this realization that allowed me, as a spiritual person and a committed Orthodox Jew, to realize how I could consistently connect to God, where and how I could find and touch His presence deep within me. To be honest, up until that point, I had many moments where I felt kind of let down and disconnected and alienated from God. I had a somewhat childish misunderstanding that when life wasn't working out for me on the outside, or I didn't feel good on the inside, and these often coincided, this meant that God wasn't listening or cooperating with me. It's embarrassing, but true. and I think it's quite common. The realization of these principles provided a doorway to a more mature and sustainable inside-out relationship with God, one that was now unconditional and built on solid, stable ground. These principles look at the potential to create, rather than trying to analyze, control, or reframe that which has already been created. They look to the formless rather than the form, the spiritual rather than the physical, the infinite rather than the limited. Thought is the missing link between the spiritual roots and the physical world that we engage with. Understanding its nature realigns and reminds us of our deeper nature and the limitless potential we have to create and to love and to change and to heal and to learn and to evolve. There can be no greater gift.